All right, welcome back to Shoot Me Straight with Eddie and Dave and Andrea Gallagher, who is joining us today and will be joining us at least once a month for this new series, which we are going to start today, which is called The Truth About Transition, and that is transitioning from whether it be the military, law enforcement, or, you can really put it on any career that you have and where you have to transition out of that into something new. And us coming from the military background, Andrea and I, after doing a little bit over 20 years and having to transition out of the military into the civilian life, and we just want to sort of talk about the ups and downs, the struggles that we face during that, and just how we've overcome some of those struggles and how we're able to keep pushing forward and having what I would say the best marriage in the world. But this has been on our heart for a long time, and I think now is a good time more than ever, especially on today's special day.
Yes, birthday.
Andrea's birthday.
Yay!
Yeah. But yeah,
on her birthday,
Yay.
Selflessly giving back.
Oh,
as always.
well,
yes.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you for having me. Thanks for letting me crash the Dude podcast.
Dude.
Well, we need to spruce this place up a little bit. So
yeah, we could use some feminine energy around here.
Yeah, for sure.
Dude, Andrea, I can't think of a better couple to go through this series with. As an outsider, knowing y'all's experience, I think of just someone that's not in the military, how many guys I've seen that are struggling with transition.
Right.
Tons. And not just that, but it's not – everyone focuses on the guy in the military, but the spouse. And they're two become one. So the other side of it too. So I think your experience around it is super helpful. Y'all want to start with any of the questions, or y'all want to give an overview?
Well, I would just say, in addition to what Eddie said, which is obviously we're focusing on the transition for us, which was out of special operations, which, he retired after 20 years. We had a super dramatic exit. Most people that probably follow this podcast know about that. But one thing I do want to bring up is I had a girlfriend. She was also a team wife and then a licensed marriage and family therapist. And she said, life happens in the transitions. So I think about from a perspective of, a new baby or a career change, or I would say even broadening it to that, we're currently going through, we have one kid left at home. You have all the little babies at home. Yeah. We have just, Ryan is at home, and then Trevin and Ava are off adulting, and that's a huge transition in life. So I think as we go through this series, I think when people have questions or comments, it'll be mostly focused on that element of our transition and how do we navigate that in a way that is going to strengthen and provide insights and a lot of transparency. I mean, we've gone through a ton of ups and downs through that. But yeah, we're happy to be here, and I'm stoked to just open up this conversation. I think it'll bring up other stuff too as we go,
Yeah, I think this will, like you said, start bringing up other topics that need to be covered. And I think one of the main reasons that we wanted to do this is obviously we've been through it, and we're not stating we're not experts on anything, but we have the experience of going through it, and that's what we can share. But what I've seen and what we've both seen is, you have these married couples, especially in, from our last line of work, where they make it through the 20 years or however many years they're in, and then they get out, and that's where the divorce happens, right? That's where, and I've seen it a lot, where these couples fall apart after the career's over and during the transition process. And I think Andrea can bring to light just what some of these spouses, I think, go through. And like you said, Dave, a lot of the focus is on the military member themselves, they're going through the transition. Well, if you're married, they're not the only ones going through it. It's the family going through it. And I think with these spouses, they sit there and support that member their whole career, and depending on what job they have in the military, and then coming from the special operations background, we're deployed all the time, and then when we're back, we're training all the time. And I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like the spouses a lot of the times think like, okay, I'm going to, we're going to put up with this while they're in, but it will change once everything's going to be better once he gets out.
Like looking towards a date in the future.
Yeah,
going,
like,
okay, this isn't right now. This sucks now. It's chaos. But
you have something to blame.
Once he gets out,
you can blame the special operations community. You can blame the op tempo. You can blame, okay, they're putting so much pressure on him. That's why we're having, these issues, or that's why. And you adapt to that. And I think you set that goalpost, right? Like, okay, this is all going to end once he gets out. And then that's kind of what we're saying. And that is the reason behind the name, is the truth about transition is not discussed, because when you're in, you're in. And I'm sure a lot of people, law enforcement, any of these communal job fields, that it's like you're in a community. So if you're in a law enforcement community, if you're in a first responder community, or even firefighters, they live together. Like it's like you're in this kind of aspect where once you cross that threshold and you're like, okay, I'm out. And a lot of times we would see it. We would have very close friends and they would like, okay, we're going to retire. We're transitioning out. And it's just like, boom, they're off in the ether. They don't talk about what they're going through. You don't talk about like what you're in. And so there's this chasm that I think that's where the truth comes in.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, I think the guys are telling themselves a story. The women are telling themselves a story, saying this is all going to be remedied once we are out of this environment, once we're out of this, like the holder that I was feeling. And just for me personally, I was like, he is so beholden to naval special warfare, and he had this insane op tempo and 20 years of military service in the war on terror. I mean, he was part of a very special, unique generation. I mean, he didn't stop from the moment he got in, pre 9/11 to when he got out in 2019. He did not stop. Yeah. And so I just think there's a lot that happens at that threshold of, okay, what's next? That's what we're going to try to get into and uncover the truth about that really people don't talk about.
Yeah, and I think, just like everything else, sometimes the truth hurts, right? The truth is tougher than telling yourself a lie, like everything's going to be fine. And we're not here to say it's this impossible task. But I think what we want to get across, and which I think, the military does a disservice to these members before they get out by not preparing them for telling them like, hey, this is the easy part. The hard part's just about to begin. And they sort of just let these service members go and sort of figure it out on your own. And so I think, we want to have these discussions here and just talk about what we've been through personally to help others and I guarantee we're not all different. It's a lot of us go through very similar trials and tribulations when we get out. So we would like to just cover that and discuss what we've been through and hopefully help others that are listening.
Do you think sometimes the service members feel and their wives feel like it's unique to them? Like they feel like, oh man, I should just be happy he's back home, but I'm depressed.
Because it's not talked about, when you're, like I said, the chasm between when you're in, and your community is those people that are with you in that community. Oh. So you're going through those things. And then the people that are transitioning, they're cut off from that. And then they're trying to get into a new community, whether that's where they live or they're establishing a new job, a new workplace. So that's where the hard part to me comes in. And I have a really good friend, Melanie Luttrell, who was like, they put so much time and effort into training these guys as they're getting in. They go through BUDS, they go through SQT, they go through all these things to learn how to be special operators. There is zero training, really. I mean, they're doing a little bit more, sure. We had some stuff in the SEAL team.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of training or education on how do you find your footing when you get out? How do you establish a new way of life? How do you deal with all this stuff that you went through? And I will tell you, we have this phrase, we talk about it in the book, we talk about it openly. I think you share it quite a bit. It's like, we look at it as a freight train. When you're in that community and you're in special operations, you're just putting everything in the caboose. Mm-hmm. It all goes in the caboose. And at the point where you're getting out, then I feel like the perspective that he never had the chance to address a lot of these things. He never had the chance to go get evaluated for TBIs or, you know, whatever, talk about, okay, I think I have trouble with anxiety or whatever. And he talks openly about it now, but it's like,
Just
he
get
didn't
healthy.
even have a spare second to think about that. So then when that caboose comes careening in, it's not just on him, it's on the family.
Yeah. And I think that is
So that's
one of the big truths that doesn't get talked about is, the individual that's in, and when they get out, they're going to have to deal with everything that they've thrown in the caboose over the past however many years. But it's not just them dealing with it. Now the wife, the kids, all of them are going to see it plain as day, because while you're in, you're gone. Like, your marriage, especially, and I can, only speak to what we went through. Like, you have a different type of marriage, right? Because you're gone all the time. So when you're home for those short periods, that's like, okay, you're just trying to maintain and have a healthy, what you think is a healthy marriage, and before you have to take off again. But then once you get out, you're home 24/7. And now not only does a family have to adjust and be like, okay, now we're together all the time, but now you're just not together all the time. Now we have to deal with all of your shit that you've been throwing in the caboose that is going to come out
for maybe
eventually.
20 plus years.
Yeah. And, we're not, and I know we're bringing up special operations. This is not unique to special operations. This is not unique to the military in general. I mean, like Andrea said, there's law enforcement, firefighters, first responders. I mean, and then even regular civilian jobs, they go through the same thing, right? And I just think that this is why we wanted to do this, because I don't think it's talked about enough. There are a lot of good things that are coming out now. Our good friend, Dr. Chris Free, which we will hopefully have on this podcast soon. He's a very dear friend of ours. He's a saint, but he just came out with his book, The Operator Syndrome, which, for those listening, go ahead and look that book up. And if you are struggling, go ahead and get yourself a copy. I can't recommend that enough. That's helped us tremendously, just talking to him. But I do think it will help just, having a couple just like us. And it's not like we're not anything special, but we've been through it, and we want to share those experiences.
And I think we're going to try to share some of the valuable things that we've learned, which that was the one big thing. Dr. Chris came into our lives. It was a virtual, just like a tele-talk therapy type thing that he was doing with Eddie, because Dr. Chris's research and all of the things that he's gone through is mostly with special operators and their spouses. And what he has established is the operator syndrome is, he kind of terms it as a constellation of effects. So, like, it's not just, oh, this person has PTSD. Oh, this person has a TBI. It's more of a constellation. And that's what we're trying to get across is, this is not to be negative. This isn't to throw stones at any one person or community or how people are navigating this process. It's to openly talk in a transparent way that it is a process. You're going to have to go through some maybe pretty big ups and downs with your spouse or significant other. Hope to God you're still married, because the divorce rate in the SEAL teams is about 120%. And that's, obviously calculating it, I think, second or maybe even third wives, because it's just very difficult to maintain a marriage. And I think what we're seeing is, by the time you sacrifice your life, your limb, and even if you do survive, and let's say you don't get maimed or killed, your mental and emotional and all those components that have been affected, you sometimes burn bridges with the closest people in your life, being your spouse, your children, your family members, right? They're taking the brunt of this. So I think we're going to try to share some of the people and the things that we did that we have in our toolbox, and expand those and let people know that, we want to try to give people the ways that they can look to certain things and start to integrate into their lives to get the help that they need. Because it's not a one-size-fits-all, and there is no one thing. And that's, I think, another thing we feel very strongly about. I think there's a lot of stuff getting pushed on different communities like, oh, do this, and it'll be the magic pill that gives you the freedom and hope and answers
Yeah.
that you've been seeking, and we are here to tell you that's not true either.
No.
We had to do so much day in, day out, hard work. And like, we talk about all the time, it's very hard to be a good parent. It's so much easier to be a bad parent than it is a good parent. It is so much easier to have a horrible marriage than it is to have a good marriage, because it is such hard work. But for us, we have always, in the SEAL teams, outside of the SEAL teams, we have put God at the center. And I look at it like a triangle. You're two people on your path, and you're in this lifestyle. And in that transition, even in the SEAL teams, like I was like, as long as we keep God at the center, that triangle, we're gonna get to where we need to get to, right? And that's what we want to talk about is you can get there. It's going to be rough. It might be. And then there might be seasons of beautiful times. And then all of a sudden something erupts, or, you deal with a trauma that you didn't even know you were holding inside. And that's what we're trying to talk about, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And then, like Andrea said, there is a lot of treatments that you can get. And we're not trying to put a negative context on any of those either, by saying, there is no end all be all. All those treatments they are good, right? They push you in the right direction forward. And there's nothing wrong, because I went through a buffet of treatments.
Done about every single one.
Everything. Yeah, because and I think that's the premise of what you're talking about, babe, is you got to put in the work, right? So doing all those treatments, it's not something that I wanted to do. Like, I wasn't like, yes, I want to go do all these things. But I knew, I was like, I want to fix myself in order to be a better person for my kids and my wife, right? And that's the premise of why I went to go do these treatments. But at the end of the day, those are all just, Band-Aids that can help you push forward. But you and your spouse both have to recognize the fact that it's work. Just like if you didn't have a transition and you just have a marriage in general, you still have to put in work towards that marriage. Now, with a transition involved, yeah, dude, you got to put in a lot more work to make that marriage work. And, I think one of the many pieces of advice I give to my friends when they're about to get out, and like I said, I'm not an expert, but I can say, I'm like, have patience with each other. Be patient, because you're both going to want to kill each other at some point or get on each other's nerves when you get out. And it is going to seem like this impossible task, because maybe the one spouse isn't acting the way that you expected them to when they got out, and vice versa, right? And so you both need to be patient with each other, and both have to recognize the fact that you have to work on yourself in order to have a good relationship with your spouse and your children. And I think that is, another thing we want to talk about and cover.
I think that we had a real big awakening when we went to some type of counseling at the Rock Church with someone. And, because he always had this like, oh, it's me, I'm the problem, it's me, like Taylor Swift. And
I kind of agree with that. If I can fix this really fast. Just get rid of Eddie.
Yeah.
And Andrea, your life will be.
He's so cute, though. Yeah. He's so cute, and he's so ornery. But I think at that point, it was, I think the service member or the person that is the one that has had maybe the more trauma, the more op-tempo stuff or whatever, whether it's a law enforcement or, not to say the spouses do go through a lot too. So whether your spouse, like we have people that we represent with Pipehitter Foundation, like the woman is the one that's in the
trenches.
Yeah, the trenches. And so I think where we learned to that person, if they're struggling, if they have maybe some level of trauma or any type of residual effects, whether that's TBI, PTSD, anxiety, depression, on and on and on. They can feel like, okay, I'm the problem. And I do think that there was a time where I was like, yeah, he is freaking 80% of the problem. He is 70% of the problem. He has these things or addictions or abuse or things that he's doing that abusing alcohol or whatever, that was like, come on, my man, let's go. Let's get this, but when we really, I think, hit our stride was I laid all that down, as did he, and was like, stop it with the percentages. We are in a 50-50 here. I don't care, you know, and again, that's me and my judgment of him and maybe not looking at his problem or what does depression do? What does anxiety do? And I think there is a level of you've got to stop pitting yourself against your own spouse and say, let's lay this down. It's 50-50, put it at the foot of the cross. And it's like you are tearing your own marriage down unless you say, it's 50-50. I have my issues. He had his issues. So I think the moment that, and he would do it too, frankly, but I'm the problem. Oh, I know. And I'm like, we got to quit doing that. And it was me too, right? I was like, you are the problem. And so that's where I think we really learned a lot is we were like, this is 50-50 from here on out. Don't even say anything like, you know, in that regard of like putting more blame on one person is just, it's not going to be helpful, even if in reality, that person is the one that's struggling more. Look at it as a 50-50 problem because it truly is.
Well, you're a team, right? Yeah. And that's the way you got to look at it. And I think and I'll speak, you know, just from my own point of view, like, and I can pretty much, I think most guys that come from our community, it doesn't, you know, the special operations community, I would think feel the same way. Like you are married to that special operations community as well, right? And so like that is your team. So you don't have this, like, you know, I loved my wife, like that's the closest thing to me, but you are taken away, like you're like, hey, the team needs me, right? So all your decisions are based off of what the team needs. And when you get out, you have to realize like that's not your team anymore. She's my team. Like my family's my team. And as soon as you can recognize that, and I'm talking to the guys that are, you know, get out, you have to recognize like that is your team now. And you have to take that same effort, the same amount of grit, endurance, resilience that you put into that job, and now you take that and now start putting it into your family because they need you more than anything. And at the end of the day, and Andrea said this to me during my whole career, it's like at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to be there at the end. Like the teams, all these people are not going to be here when we're older.
Life goes on.
Yeah.
Without you.
And sometimes
it's
that's
part of, you're a cog in a wheel, but it's part of, I feel like it's the guys have a very strong level of indoctrination, right? And then they're told you are a shitbag if you are not putting and prioritizing the teams, the community, the job above everything else, including, you know, God and family. Sometimes those are the things that fall. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, other than I believe for a very long time, I prayed, I'm like, he needs to get the SEAL teams out of the idol. It was an idol in his heart. It was something that God answered by throwing him in jail, which we can get into that. But
hallelujah,
praise the Lord. But no, it rightly so, right? At the end of the day, he is being put in life-threatening positions with the guys that are, you know, his brothers, and then by way of that community, like we call them brothers, like that's my brother too, and then their wife is my sister. That's what we call each other. So, and that gets me emotional, but it's real. It's not like that's a negative, so I don't want that to come off as a negative. You as a spouse adapt to, that is the truth, because that's what it needs to be, because he's going to put his life on the line for his brother, just like his brother's going to put, and that's where I want my buddy putting himself in front of a bullet for my husband. That's the way I want it. So there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself. That is the way it should be. And hopefully, if you're a spouse, you can make peace with that. And I had to, because I knew how much he loved us. I knew how much he loved the kids. But at the end of the day, he's called to a mission, and you can either support them in that mission and accept that, yes, you are second. And right or wrong, there is some negatives that come out of that. And so I think when you do have it a little bit askewed and it's like God is second to that idol, that's no good, and that's where he needed to have that reckoning. But when you get out and you've been indoctrinated, like, I will, be a part of this team forever, and they can't, and you do. I think it's confronting, and he can talk about this, when he got out, and it was like a jarring effect that he, broke down, because it's like, they're going to go on without you.
Yeah.
And that's the nature of the beast, right? Naval Special Operations is not going to stop when you retire. They're going to keep on going. And you, I think, have a crisis of belief, and you're like, well, wait a minute. I had to be there so I wasn't a shitbag. And then and there's guys, they've lost their wife. They've lost a second wife. They've lost family. Their kids don't talk to them. And then it's like, whoa, that's a rude awakening for these guys, where it's like, bye, see you when we see you. And then that's where I'm saying they experience this chasm of like, life does go on. And when you have that much of a sacrificial,
like your identity.
Yeah, your identity is severely affected. And I think some of this stuff, he didn't really realize it until after he was on the other side. Like, I don't think he would have said while he was in that he prioritized it that much, or put the SEAL teams first in the truest form.
No, I don't think
Only after he's gotten out, he's like, oh yeah, I
wasn't self-aware enough to be able to make that statement while I was in, because I truly was like, I want to be the best husband and father I can be while doing this job. And that's it's a struggle. It doesn't matter what type of individual you are in the team. It's like, that is just a struggle in general, because it's a very demanding job. So I think for myself, you make these like excuses, or not justifications, I guess. Like, well, I'm doing this for you, right? I'm doing all this stuff to protect you and the family, and I'm trying to be the best, husband I can be, but also be the best, fighter I can be, or SEAL I can be as well. And so you can justify a lot of stuff in your mind by
it's a lot of ego.
Yes, it's a lot of ego.
Fed.
And then it wasn't until I got out, and probably like a couple years after I got out, where you start reflecting, because you start becoming more self-aware of like, okay, this is the issues that I did have when I was in that you just didn't know, like the anxiety, the depression, all this other stuff, and you're like, okay, I did put that job way ahead of everything else. And there was decisions that I made that I could have, looking back, you're like, I could have made better decisions for my family or whatnot. But that's at the end of the day,
job though too.
Yeah, it's the nature of the job. So I think you can't just stick on that either. Like, oh, well, I shoulda, coulda, woulda. It's like, nope, you did. All that's done. You're still together with your family. What are you going to do moving forward now to make your marriage, your family flourish in the upcoming years, right? And you can't start doing that until you start working on yourself, and also working on your marriage as a fresh start almost. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I think but the true awakening came when he got on his knees in jail and prioritized
Oh, for sure.
That was the only way. Like, yes, I agree. All the myriad of things, and we'll get into some of the things that we did and the treatments that he did and stuff like that. But that's the beginning, right? If you don't have that prioritized relationally, I don't think that your eyes are open enough to be able to humble yourself and see like, whoa, what was I doing? I mean, he was in a fog of war, constant deployments, constant workup deployments, and these cycles. And I think what people don't understand, and for the civilian perspective, it's like a workup is like a preseason, and then a deployment is like a Super Bowl or like a game day. So when they're home during workup, they are physically present sometimes, but a lot of times they're doing trainings in different areas that are local to the United States. Okay, so when they are home, which is very few and far between in a workup cycle, they're not present. They're a shell. And I think one of the movies that did so good at portraying that perspective was when we watched American
Sniper. Yeah,
I felt like the way that Taya Kyle and Chris Kyle it was very transparent that she was at home. You'd see her raising a baby, and then he's gone, and then he's there, but he's not. He's they're in a fog of war, but then the demand that is placed on them to train, to be physically ready, mentally ready, the responsibilities that even when they're not in an intense training, they're at the team space, they're getting their gear ready, they're doing all these things. Like, it's insane, which is why I think that he relates so much. Our buddies that are professional athletes that are just like boom, 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 boom. We talk about all the time. It's such a similar thought process that you are given over to the team. The spouse is a supporting role. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic. But yeah, they're not really there. So from that perspective, you know, on deployment, they are physically away. They're usually in an area of severe danger. And then that can be a 6 to 8 month where they're physically gone the whole time. But even when they're home for workups, it's pretty few and far between. So that's where he's saying when he transitioned out of the military and he was actually there, I was like, dude, he has these really erratic cycles that he was struggling with. And I was like, it was like this. I was like, what is wrong with you that how? But then you're like, oh, well, no kidding. I mean, he was always gone. He wasn't there. And then you're just when they're home and finally present, you're kind of in a honeymoon phase. And you're like, okay, catch up with the kids, take them to SeaWorld, go to movies, play Disneyland, Dad, you know, go out, see friends, have dinner, go party. And that's another thing. There's a lot of just things that can, I think, layers of masking the struggles that he was probably having when he was in the SEAL teams that were not as apparent. So like that's some of the things that when we got out and learning that rhythm of what does life look like with him home. And then also he got out right before COVID hit and just like then being stuck in the homes. I mean, he's chewing the carpet, peeling the paint off the walls. Like he's just like couldn't sit still.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was hard too for him. So that there's so many layers that I think go through it. And it wasn't just like one thing that we had to learn to deal with. It was like, whoa, you have a hard time sitting still, which I knew, but it was not only the mental sitting still, but the physical sitting still.
Yeah.
Because he was just always
and then it's
at a breakneck pace.
And I think that's when, for me, that's when like the depression and anxiety really sunk in, is because I think in retrospect, you know, I look back now, I'm like, dude, I had anxiety. I've always had anxiety.
Even before the SEAL teams.
Even before the SEAL teams. It's part of it's in my genetics as well. But I think I was able to, while I was in, I think everybody has anxiety.
You channel
to a certain, but if you're able to channel it and focus on something and be completely like engrossed in what you're doing. And, you know, we talk about that with like jiu-jitsu. That's why jiu-jitsu is so helpful to a lot of people, because you go for that hour and you have to be focused on that hour so you don't get choked out. And that's why a lot of guys, they're like, dude, I feel so much better now when I went and did this hour, is because you were focused on that and not on everything else in life that can give you anxiety. Well, when I was in, I was able, you know, and I'll say like that's what the SEAL teams did for me, is I was so passionate and focused on my job that I really did not feel the anxiety. I was like, no, I can channel everything to this, right? And so when I got out, like she was saying, I would be sitting there like almost shaking, like, dude, what am I doing? Like, I can't.
Well, the loss of purpose, loss of mission, loss of focus,
but you can't
loss
figure
of brotherhood,
it out.
like at all of the things. Like,
yeah, you can't figure it out. You're like, why am I feeling this way? And then that's when then the depression kicks in, because then you feel I'm ashamed that I am not acting like how I pictured myself. Like I was a freaking Navy SEAL. I did this and this and this, and now I can't even handle simple little tasks at home, like just sitting still, you know, and then add everything else that Andrea has been covering the past 20 years while I've been in. Now you want to, you know, you're like, I want to help out. I want to like get involved, but you literally cannot function. Like at least for me, I was like, it's hard for me to do these little tasks. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's some of the stuff that, you know, I had to deal with and go through. And there's a lot more other factors that are involved in that too. That's just one little thing that is involved in the whole transition piece.
But I think also being honest about it, because I think there was a very long time, and especially in the SEAL teams, and I don't know where you got this or whatever, but I would always be like, you are so emotionally detached from your thoughts, feelings, anything. He couldn't identify, like I was like, like, you know how the little kids, you're like, what are you? Happy, sad, mad, angry, hungry? I felt like he was so detached that his emotional intelligence was affected, where I was like, what is the feeling, you know? And then it was funny because I think he had an eye-opening moment where Ryan, our youngest, had to really go through a lot of emotional, like, behavioral therapy. And like the behavioral therapist like would look at him and like, he's like, I know she wants to get her hands on me and like talk to me about what. I'm like, well, at the end of the day, he, I think, had just really blunted his ability to process emotions. Again, he didn't have time for it. And so even identifying, and so we would talk about with Ryan, our son, you know, it's like sadness and him losing countless friends is a primary emotion. But the secondary emotion that's like the fireworks display is anger. And he was very angry a lot, and so was our son. And so that was kind of this mirroring time that was before we got out and when Ryan was younger, where we kind of all went through it. Even Ryan, even Trevin and Ava, our other kids, we were like, him and I were like, this is so informative. Oh my gosh. So we all learned a lot through that I think helped us develop a framework of like, we're all not dealing with stuff.
Yeah.
It wasn't just him. And it was like, the mental picture that comes to mind is I was like, this is a trickle-down effect. The demands that were being put on him from Naval Special Warfare and the op-tempo and the battle rhythm was so chaotic that it is only reasonable to think that that is getting put on this individual. This individual is supposed to be the leader and the head of a family and a household. And that is getting put onto the spouse because it's like, you get no breaks. There's no break. And so then the spouse is on the kids. You get no breaks. We are here. We're in it. This is how it is. Suck it up. This is the battle rhythm. People die. It's like, we really were like, we were both, I think, blinded for many, many years because there was no break.
And I think, you know, it was a learning process for everybody during that time that was involved in the global war on terror, right? Like, all of us were volunteering that were in like, hey, we want to keep going back over. We believed in what we were doing, and rightly so, right? That's part of the job, and I don't have no regrets about that. But the one thing about that job is they train you should be able to make decisions, and these are life and death decisions without letting emotion get in the way. And that I will say that's a right state of mind, right? You don't want to be making life and death decisions with emotions involved. But the problem with that is going to war and being over there and having to deal with a lot of the things that war brings. It's emotional. It's traumatic. It's all these things like that you're dealing with that you are not forced, but through training, you're like, okay, I can't let this bother me because I have to do X, Y, and Z. I have to keep pushing forward and making right decisions. And if you get into a routine like that, and it's not even just on deployments, it's during training. During training, they throw us in some of the most complex, stressful scenarios where they want to see if you're going to be emotionally capable of handling those situations, but they also want to make sure you're not letting the emotions get the better of you, right? So if you get into that routine where you're constantly pushing back emotions, you're like, nope, I'm not going to let this bother me. Nope. And then you deal with all the outside stuff too, like the loss of friends and the loss of teammates, and then having to come home from deployments and dealing with the family and having to do reintegration. Your brain defaults, at least mine did, to no emotion. what's the answer for this? Here's what we're going to do. And that's it. Like, there's no emotional attachment, which she said does trickle down. It trickles to her. It trickles to the kids. And it's,
And I don't think it was a conscientious decision. It's a response.
Yeah.
And this is where I would be like, you're not a machine. You are a human. But he was being trained to be a machine-like weapon for the United States government. And that is just the reality of what he was called to do. And Naval Special Operations is the tip of the spear in that. And so I think you could say the same thing of any modality, whether it's like, or even look, these CEOs that are the tops of these companies, or a lawyer, a high-powered lawyer, or someone, even the garbage man. It's like there is responsibilities and there are, things that are established when you're in a job that you maybe fall prey to. And I think a lot of it was those residual effects is what we're talking about, that you can't just turn that on and off. And if you look at like behavioral therapy, it's like when you numb one emotion, you will intrinsically have that ability. You will start being numb to joy, love, passion. You're going to just tamp down emotions. And so you can't say, well, I'm just not going to deal with sadness. That's just not how emotions work. You start to the whole spectrum of emotions. So like, that's where I'm saying he had a very low range of emotions. And I would say, like, I don't know, there's probably 30, 40 like emotions. I don't even know. We need to get the chart. Let's get the chart here. But he legit was, I think, probably wired down to 2 to 3 that he could operate in and have awareness of, because that he was that laser focused into, the job. And it was like he would, even if I would say, are you upset about this? Are you dealing with, let's just say, your friend, dying or whatever? I wouldn't say it in that way, but like he truly could not get there.
No. And
he couldn't get there.
And like questions like that then would trigger me to get angry, right? Because it's
he
not,
didn't want to deal with it.
Like, I'm not angry at her, but it's like now you're forcing me to like start digging into my own self and, actually uncovering probably a million different things. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't have time. And my body would just be like, nope, we don't have time for that. No. Get pissed.
Yeah.
Tell her to bugger off in some way. Don't bother me about this. Yeah. And
Bill Burr has a skit like that.
But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like even last night, Ryan was having some emotional stuff going on, and I went into his room and talked to him, and he was like, I'm angry. He's like, I can't stop being angry, and I'm like, okay, well, what are you angry about? And he's like, I don't know. And then I was like, well, are you sad? And he's like, yes. And I was like, what are you sad about? And he's like, he misses Trevin. Oh. But I'm like, I'm smart enough to know what this is now. So I'm like, dude, that's you. Yeah, you are my clone. And that's what I told him. I was like, some of this is genetics. I'm like, you are defaulting. You are sad, and it's okay to be sad. I'm like, if you want to cry. I'm like, let's just get it out. But you're defaulting to anger because you don't feel like you should be able to be sad, or you should be, showing sadness right now. And I was like, it's okay. Like, but
We've had to work a ton on emotional intelligence in our family since.
Yeah.
What some of the most helpful stuff is just relating. Sometimes it's tough. It's really tough as dads too, because we're like, okay, I got a responsibility. This is a job, right? True. And so I need to relay wisdom to them. Mm-hmm. And so I'll think, I had one with Everly the other night. I have a lot of examples of not doing it the most ideal.
Oh. So do we.
That's pretty much all my examples for the most part. But I had one the other night that I caught before I responded. She was saying something about someone was making fun of her glasses or something like that when she was at school that day. Immediately, I'm like, my first feeling.
Deck him in the face.
Anger. I'm like, what's his name? And instead, I was like, wait, time out. And I'm like, connect with her. Mm-hmm. And I go, I understand how that feels. I was like, when Dad was young, he had that big time. And she says, you did? And I began to tell her a story of when I was younger, of getting made fun. And that, like, it's tough because as dads and as men, I think we solve problems, right? The problem is you're angry. You're having emotions. That's not a problem. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Like, you want them to have emotion, right? Yeah. And you want them to be able to talk to them about it, but, like, relating to them is so helpful with it. One of the things I think of, though, of what y'all are sharing is, I think of a lot of things, but I think how you get a lot of training into becoming a Navy SEAL and all the workups, all that stuff. There is so little resources for the wives, and if I'm a spouse, I should say, as a spouse, is there this sense of, I don't see how there could not be a sense of, you know what, I've been on the back burner, I've been doing the behind the scenes, I've been doing all these things, and you've been going out playing G.I. Joe, right? And yes, I know you're providing, I know you love us, but, like, I've been waiting for this day that you get out, so now I can get some appreciation. We can actually have a marriage that is, and then going, now you're telling me I got to go into a whole other battle?
Yep.
Yeah.
And possibly one of the toughest ones since.
This is why no one talks about it.
And
that's the truth.
The spouse, in the husband, in a sense, it's almost like both victims. I'm not saying victims. Not victim mentalities.
But
But I'm just saying, like, the husband's he's dealing with everything that he's dealing with, and good intentions or not. But you guys are good because y'all are both willing to work. Y'all have put in that work, and I hope that for every other couple in transition. But for the spouse that goes, there's another battle. What?
Yeah.
No, thank you.
And I think, that's a great point that you just brought up, and which is, why.
To a T, what
yes,
goes on.
What goes on, and what we were talking about, why these marriages fall apart after they've just dealt with that whole career, is because the spouse is like, listen, I put in the work, I've supported you, I've taken care of the kids by myself, I've paid the bills by myself, I've done like all these little tasks.
I take care of you, too.
Yes. And then now that we're out, you're telling me I have to put up with now your shit that you're dealing with because of the choices that you made, because you volunteered to go do this. Yes, that does happen. And I will say this, the spouse has every right to feel that way. There's nothing wrong with feeling that way. It's just you have to communicate that in a way where it's not as, like, I don't know, confronting or like blaming, like what Andrea said, not blaming or this percentage, like I've done this and you haven't done this. It's, you should be able to present that in a clear, articulate manner that is not going to cause that person to respond in a confrontational manner, right? And then as the husband or the wife that's a service member, you have to realize what your spouse has been doing the whole time that you've been playing war, right? A lot of the focus is on the service member. It's like, everyone's like, thank you for your service.
They're the
and
hero.
You've done this and you've done that. Yeah. You volunteered to do that. You're not like the fact that I think it does a disservice where, yes, people should thank veterans, like, I guess, for doing that job. But at the same time, you stop putting them up on this pedestal. Like, they're human beings just like everybody else. They volunteered to do that job. And they are not the only ones who have served this country. The family that has followed them along the whole time has served just as much. They might not have been on the front lines doing the work. They've been behind making sure everything can be taken care of so that person can go to the front lines and focus on that job alone. Yeah. And that is so much work. I can't even begin to describe. And you learn that when you get out. Like, just like, holy shit, like, she's been doing all this the whole time, and you really don't have a clue because you're not there. You have an idea of it, and you're like, oh, yeah, I know what she's doing. She's doing this and this and this. But until you are home 24/7 and you start trying to take up some of those responsibilities, I guarantee that's when you realize, like, wow, a lot of the times you're like, I just want to go back to, I'll go back to war in a heartbeat than deal with this.
Yeah, which is selfish, right? Like you got to look at the wife and go like, no, I need to work on me.
Yes.
And step in here. For the wife, I'm going to just say wife. I know like spouse, but a lot of times it's the wife. And so I think, there's some sense it's like, I get it. Like you're going, I've been selfless. Now I got to go into a whole other battle. And just similar to like NFL players we've had on before, it's like, it's almost like another kid. It's like, I've been the adult here and I want a spouse that's an adult as well, but you're emotionally stunted. You don't know how to, you don't know how,
unavailable.
Yeah,
too,
you don't know how to pay bills.
Yeah.
Like everything's been taken care of for you so that you can just focus on doing your job, right? Just like an NFL player.
And that is what you do, and you're spot on with that. So the true best spouses will, and I feel like that's where at the end of even the last deployment that he was on, like we were just battle-hardened veterans. Like we crushed that deployment. It's like I do me, you do you. Like he's killing it. I'm at home, same thing. But that's like you get to that point, right? Like you develop to that point. But what I will say is you can truly have a lot of resentment, unforgiveness, and that's where I think some of this is really some of the stuff that we're going to get into talking about is the spouses are intrinsically put on the back burner, right? Yeah, they're the rock stars, all this, and rightly so, and they are. And most of the spouses that I know are some of the most selfless, outstanding, like rock stars in their own right, kill it in life, behind the scenes, run and gun, sometimes, work outside the home, raise the kids, deal with these guys. And those are like my sisters. And I'm like, it's truly something that's why I think we're doing this.
Yes.
It's not, it's my motivation. I love his buddies and they're like my brothers, but that is my heart is for these women because it is not easy. And I hate to see, we hate to see these marriages that can be derailed, quite frankly. And we saw it in the SEAL teams. Like we did it in the SEAL teams. We opened up, we told our problems. We said we've been confronted with like serious stuff. Like we've gone head to head. We've had knockdown dragouts. We've done things the wrong way, all these things. And so talking to other couples that while they were in that were like, I am going to divorce him. And it's like, look, maybe you do, but like, we've been there. We've done that. Here's what we did, go to God, go to counseling. And, in some marriages, I think we're saved, not because of us, but because we were a part of, let's reveal our stuff. And that's what I feel like God has called us to. I think a lot of times when I look at myself, when I look at Eddie and us as a couple, we've been told and I believe firmly, like we are forerunners on a lot of stuff. And so we usually try to reach back and help our neighbor, right? That's what you're supposed to do. If I've been through something, if I've been through a hardship or, I have friends that have lost children. I have friends that have gone through cancer. I have friends that have gone through whatever. If you are in that position where you've gone through something and people look at you like, I don't know how you did it. I don't know how you did it. And I can look at people and say that. People look at us. They look at our story. They look at our family. They look at our kids and like, I don't know how you did it. People come to us all the time, even now, like years later after writing the book and doing the audio book. And it's like, I had no idea what you guys went through exiting the military. And then even after that, after 20 years of service, what you went through right at that tail end. And that's what we're saying. If we can make it and we went through what we went through, you can make it. the spouse, and that's who I'm talking to, the spouse can make it, or that guy can make it. Because I love the men, too, that serve, and I have a ton of guy friends. I don't bash men. I love men. I want men to be men. I want women to be women. But I'm like, we have to be together on this. And that's where we want to come together and just tell people, like, you truly can make it. You can. You're not going to be robbed of, but you got to get rid of the unforgiveness. You got to get rid of unforgiveness. You got to get rid of resentment. You got to get rid of the ego. You got to address your issues. You know, and if we can get rid of those things, if we can talk about it openly, you have that chance, you know, to get through it.
For the wives, do you think that starts the way that starts? I'm just thinking if I'm in that shoes. That was an opportunity to make a joke about me being in a woman's shoes.
Uh-oh.
I thought you were going to take it.
If the shoe fits, Dave. If the shoe
I was
fits.
waiting for it. Like, I would think, yeah, of course I'm resentful. Of course, like, this selfish, like, I would go, yes, I got it. And, like, that's a healthy, like, I would think almost as like, yeah, because I have some self-respect.
Yeah.
Right? And so, and I'm not saying, like, I don't even know if there's a way around it without getting resentful at the end. Like, I think almost the first place to start is just recognizing it, right?
Yeah,
It's
and
just
you
going,
have to
hey,
also,
I got resentment.
resentment's going to be on both ends, too.
Yeah.
Like, the service member is going to be resentful about some things as well, right? Because in his mind, he's like, I just put myself through all of this, right? And now you want me to do that? Like, now you want me to be the way that you want me to be? And so there can be resentment going that way too. And, you know, and I've heard it like straight in front of me when couples are arguing, you know, and the wife will say something and the guy's like, I fucking went to war this many times and you're going to talk to, like, and it's like, dude, that has nothing to do with your marriage. But at the same time,
That would be a bad couple to say that to.
I'm just saying, like, yeah, but those are like things that get said back and forth, and that's all ego. That's all ego. And that's where we're talking about, like, both individuals sort of have to, meet in the middle, set the ego aside. What's done in the past is done. Like, what happened in the past happened in the past. What are you going to do moving forward now?
Yeah.
That's, I think, the other thing. So the truth, the truth will set you free. If you are honest and he is honest and says, I did this, I went to war for you. And I'm like, nah, brother, you went to war for you. You freaking loved every minute. And we talk about that. We're like, he had the time of his life.
Yeah.
Those are his best friends. There is nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with celebrating and we look back now because people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you let your son go in the military after what you guys went through. And we're like, no, those were some of the best years of our life. Thank God he has lived to tell about it, you know, because I could have lost him in a lot different way than going to jail for the rest of his life, which we face that too. So we face the physical threat day in and day out. I mean, I don't know how many times I planned his funeral or what I would say in my head, because that is the reality.
Yep.
But I feel like you have to take on the ability to hold space for that other person's perspective, right? But he has to let the ego down enough to say, yeah, I told myself I was always doing it for you. But quite frankly, it's not that I wasn't, but there's so many motivating factors that are ego driven. And the nature of that community is the guys don't have the time or the energy or the space to think about anything else. So there can be a very high nature of selfishness that's intrinsic to the job.
Almost
that
like
they
a delusion.
don't see.
Too.
Yeah, it is a little level of almost could be a little delusional when you're in it.
Yeah.
But again, that comes because he is being exposed to blast. He is being exposed to all these things. He's in a fog. He is at a breakneck pace. You know, there's a lot of things that we could get into too about the problems that are developed or the things that are taken on between, he's diving down low, he's going up high to jump out of, there's so many factors of things that these guys get affected with that affect the spouses, the marriage. In I was going to say infidelity. That is another one, but infertility. A lot of these things are things. There's so many struggles in that community that are brought on, and a lot of the research has shown that most of the damage that these guys are sustaining is before they even get into deploying. It is in the training. It's in buds. It's in, all of these things. And a lot of times, even when they have a break from a deployment, they go to training cells and they're around impacts and blasts and all of that. So there's so much research out there. I feel like there's a lot of exposure going on. We already brought up Dr. Chris in the Operator Syndrome book. But it's like when they exposed all the stuff in the NFL about the stuff that's actually going on, their brains are fundamentally changed. At a cellular level. He has, and there's treatments that you can do. You can scan the brain. You can see these holes and these gaping spaces of damage. And I mean, he's fallen so many times. He's gotten so many concussive incidences, and there's so much that we could talk about. But I think at the end of the day, I think the bottom line that we want to cover in this series is you need to start telling the truth, and not the truth in an ugly and angry and from a very raw way of resentment and well, F you, you ruined this or that or the other, or him, to me, this is because of this, because you can do that all day.
Yeah.
Any married couple could do that. You can tear it down from the inside out. But I think that that's what we want to accomplish, is make sure that people understand you need to get help, you need to get treatments, therapies, talk to someone, get a counselor, get a third party. There's no good that can come of tearing your marriage from the inside out down, and that's going to affect you. It's going to affect your children, and we want to see every marriage be successful. I think that's our heart, is to, I think any marriage, you can have so many things happen in any marriage. You can have success or come through things on the other side and be triumphant and be better than you were before.
Yeah, it's there, some fundamentals that you've mentioned. One is both of you guys are looking at each other and going, let me understand what's going on with her. Let me understand what's going on with him.
We did not do that well for many years.
No.
For sure.
Inside and outside. So that's what we're going to talk about too. We messed a lot of stuff up too, and that's, again, I think the third parties can be helpful, because it's not a right and wrong, right? It's not he's right, I'm wrong, I'm right, he's wrong. That is no good. You have to have a goal. Do we want to have a successful, loving marriage where I'm bringing out the best in him, he's nurturing and bringing out the best in me? I mean, that cyclically, that's how a real, strong, loving relationship should work. And we did a series long ago, which I still go back to. Men need respect and women need love. And a lot of times, what was that series? It was just Love and Respect, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Was that the DVDs?
That was back when we were doing DVDs. But it was and it's a book. But we did it as a workshop series, on CDs. And that was while he was in the SEAL teams. And I would just give him ultimatums. We are doing this. We need to do this. You need to have a come to Jesus. That was probably when I was more this is you. You need to listen to this. But it was we both needed to hear those things. And it was I was not giving him the respect, and he was not giving me the love. That, and that's where they had kind of had this word picture of it's like an elephant standing on the air tube. And you're I'm not giving him respect because he's not giving me the love, and vice versa. And then you get into this vicious and ugly cycle. And when I heard that, they were a man would rather die alone and unloved than with a lack of respect. And I looked at him and I was is that true? And I didn't believe it. And he's 100% yes. And I was it blew my mind. I had no concept 100%. Of that. So that's where I think we have done these little check marks in the box leading up to a successful marriage that now we rarely fight, and when we do, we try to fight as fair as possible. It's not to say that happens every time, but we didn't fight fair for many years. We didn't like look at each other's perspective, and we didn't give ourselves the bandwidth, or we were numbing with alcohol or things that were like, you're never going to have a good outcome when you're both drunk. And like,
and unfortunately, that's when
a
lot of the stuff comes to the surface, is when you're drinking. And then that's also something that we saw as a trend, with other couples and everything. Like, you would go out and everybody be drinking, and that's where these massive fights would happen between couples, because now they got the liquid courage enough to be like, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think, and I'm not only going to do it, I'm going to do it in front of all your friends too. And that goes, vice versa, right? And that's because everything that people are shoving down, and it comes to the surface when you drink. And I mean, and I think that's part of, what we've been going through since I got out as well, is learning to, like you said, have an adult argument, not you're going to blow up, now I'm going to blow up, and we're just going to keep blowing up at each other, and this is going to go on for days, sometimes a week.
And I mean, you and Francesca could speak to this. Like, substance abuse is not something that normal marriages don't have to deal with. But I think in those communities, and, especially in the military, they're still like, you can't know this, know that. Like, you can't do drugs, you can't do this or whatever. But it's like, alcohol is a true depressant that people, in that community, and I definitely know we struggle with it too, is like, you do start to just numb. You do start to use substances, or a lot of the times that people get out and when they transition, like, I mean, he was literally hounded by the VA to get on pills. And he told them, he's like, I will not do it. I mean, you would have thought, I mean, it was months and months and months.
They were calling me, trying to get me on pills. SSRIs. I mean, it was pretty much the regular protocol prescription they give to every guy that gets out. Like, oh, yep, here you go. You're a broken toy, and we just numb yourself and continue on with life.
You're allowed to be on prescription drugs in the military, and there's people that we've known and people that have talked about openly that they were on 19 different prescriptions, and it's like, that's scary. That's so scary and you think about like what we're saying, you already have the layers of trauma, the layers of not dealing with emotional baggage, the layers of losing friends, and then you're having all of these substance abuse, whether that's alcohol and then commingling with pills and usage. So I think those are some of the things we're going to talk about too. Like, this is a way deeper issue, and a lot of times I don't think that people can get to the root of the problem because they are so numb to themselves, to the reality. And like we said, it's a lot of work. It's hard work it's hard work to be sober. Yeah. Sober-minded with yourself and honest. And that's where it's hard.
I think one of the other things to mention before, at the beginning of this series would be like, just like it can spiral down so bad and so bad, it can also spiral up.
Yes.
And I say that as an outside observer of y'all's marriage and your whole family. Like, I've seen y'all go through one of the hardest times as an outsider, right? At the end of it, I mean, Eddie looked like he had drank like explosive material when he first got out. He just looked like he was about to spontaneously combust.
Yeah. It's because I was, yeah.
And I've seen y'all get so healthy and reap, like, it like doubles up, like y'all's family is in such an awesome place, and y'all are in this harvest of all these years of hard work, right? Which is awesome. What's even more awesome about that though, Andrea, is while you're in the sweet spot that you just sit back and just enjoy and have fun 100%. And you're giving back. Like, you're in the sweet spot and you're going, hey, there's other people still back there. Like, let's start a series. Let's take some of our time while we're in this. Like, we're reaping the rewards of all this hard work we put into our marriage, into our family. Let's help others still, which is, I mean, that's the ideal. So,
well, that's how it should be. Anytime you go through something that's adverse and you are able to overcome it, and I'll say this, like, I'm not saying we have overcome it. Like, yeah, it's constant.
daily.
It never stops. And I think that's what people need to understand as well is there is no end all be all game changer. That's all of a sudden your marriage or your mental health or all this is going to be like, oh, now I don't have to do anything. It's the rest of your life. Yeah. You have to work on it the rest of your life. But if you are able to find that work and find something that's working for both you and your spouse, then it's on you to share that with others. You can't just hoard this little magic that, hey, we found it. It's like, no, we want to share this with others. I mean, that's one of the main reasons we started the Pipe Hitter Foundation as well, is because we went through that traumatic and adverse event and we were able to overcome it. Right. But that means nothing unless you are sharing that with others, unless you are able to serve others in that same capacity. That's what everybody should be doing in life. That should be everybody's goal, is to overcome challenges and then help others get over that same wall, right? And I think that, there are a lot of people out there doing that, but there's also a lot of other people that have a me mentality where it's like, I'm the only thing that matters and I did this and now I'm going to continue on. And it's like, that's great, but at the end of the day, you're going to have a very lonely existence, I think, mentally at least, if you are not able to share your experiences with others. And guess what happens when you share your experiences with others? You also grow as well. You learn from their experiences, and it just goes back and forth, right? It's like a transfer. And
you're missing out on your purpose too.
Yeah. And that's part of service, right? Like, he dedicated his life to service, and that's what
and you dedicated your life to service too. Yeah. And you still are.
Yeah. And I think that's like a premise of, Christianity is like servant leadership. And we definitely feel called to, when we started the Pipe Hitter Foundation and we got through that circumstance, oh my gosh, there is no way that it's but for the grace of God, there go I. I could not imagine the roadmap that was crafted between that hardship and the Lord guiding myself and just equipping me with the way I was, equipping his brother Sean with the way that he was. It was a once in a lifetime opportunity. We never set out, not once in our lives, and said, we want to have a nonprofit. We just didn't. It's just not something we ever set out to do. But I think that God does call you to things, and that's where you have that opportunity. And so, his service and my service to this country live on. We did it for a long time in the SEAL teams and through naval special warfare. And like I said, thank God he's alive. But the journey still goes on. The service continues. And that's what we're here to focus on, is like, that's part of it.
Yeah. When you break through, there is some like that initial transition period. Mm-hmm. Would you say there is some, so for the spouse that goes, man, why? Like, why would I do that? Like, why? I agree. I relate with you, Andrea, so much. That's my story. But now you're saying, I've been looking at this, like, benchmark, this postmark. Mm-hmm. Now he's out. Okay, let's, go to the promised land. Like, let's. But now you're telling me, no. It's actually out here. Mm-hmm. And you got to do more work to get there. And they go, man, I don't know, It for them, I get hearing the truth is mm-hmm. Hey, then you can accept it. Then you can go, okay, we got some work to do. I got some work to do on me. He's got work to do on him. But is it worth it? Like, how would you describe, like, how much it's worth it? Because I see it and I think, oh, if he got out and you're like, you know what, I've been through it. Mm-hmm. I'm done.
Yeah, that's
to not experience where y'all are at today. That's
a really tough question because, unfortunately, like, I think there is a lot of women out there that have actually been truly violated in ways that it's hard. I think everyone has to look at their own circumstance and dig deep. And I'm not here to tell a woman to stay in a situation that's toxic or dangerous or bad. Believe me, I don't agree with that. But, I think that most of the women and the examples that I've seen in this community is they are the most selfless, loving. There is a true love for these men that It is. It's close. It's very close to Christ-like. That they would do anything to see the best come out in these guys. Those are the friends that we have kept and that we have. And by the grace of God, most of our friends are still married from that community. And again, we attribute a lot of that to their faith and the women and their faith. But I would just tell anybody that, look for help. Look for guidance. Look at other people that have marriages around you that are not trying to sabotage, that are not trying, which is sometimes hard, right? That's hard even in a regular setting or a civilian community. And I just think, like attracts like. If you see a couple that's being successful at navigating or that they're not trying to tear each other down, ask them, and then hopefully you can get enough support and resources and guidance. And again, we're just here to share our story. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do, but it is possible. And I do think that, we fundamentally just I would never leave him. So even during the whole thing and when he was locked up, he's like, just leave me. Leave me. And I'm like, it was the concept of, other than if God takes him or me, that's just not in me, right? Just like it's not in him. Like he would never abandon his brother. He would never abandon me. He wouldn't abandon the kids. I think fundamentally there's people that just don't believe that when they give that vow, when they give that I'm going to stay married for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, till death do us part. I freaking meant that. I meant that. So yeah, we have been through hell and high water and back again. And it's like, I think you have to set your sights. You have to know that is not an option. It's not an option to divorce this person. And like I said, I do believe that God, there are things that the Bible says, fundamentally, if that person just walks away, abandons you, will not come to Jesus, or there's any level of abuse or things that you're in danger, by all means, you need to separate from that person. And there are people that are that toxic. I mean, there's people that get out and like you said, they're freaking radioactive.
Yeah.
And that's the work, right? Then that person needs to do the work and hope to God you can mend it and come back together when you're healthy. And, but it's a complicated thing.
Yeah. It is complicated.
We're not experts.
No, and I will say,
we're not clinical therapists, so do not.
You also, surround yourself with people who are trying to get better as well. If you are with, and we've had to do it where we've had friends that have toxic marriages, and that will trickle down into your marriage. If you're constantly with them, dealing with their toxicity and their negativity, it's going to affect yours too. So you have to make that adult decision. And sometimes it hurts because you're like, hey, dude, no, I don't want to, we're not hanging out anymore because you're affecting my marriage, my family, and you have to cut those people off sometimes. And sometimes when you do that, that's an awakening for those people. They're like, well, wait a minute. And they start maybe looking at themselves if they're, you got to guard your heart.
It's like the Bible says, guard your heart above all else because it's the wellspring of life. Like if I'm not guarding my heart, like if I'm going out with my girlfriends and just straight railing him, complaining, not seeing the best in him, or vice versa, like he trashing me or hanging out with the guys that are like, screw her, go have fun. Like in the SEAL teams, I mean, infidelity is prevalent. Sure. And that's where some of these are very bad examples that people fall into or make these mistakes. And, again, you have to work through those. And I mean, I don't know personally how women overcome the infidelity thing. That is such a violation, but I've seen women do it and their marriages are thriving. Yeah. So thank God did not call me that because I'd probably cut him. But we don't want to go there, do we? We don't want to go there. Yeah. Teflon. And I know that we had a few questions, Dave. Do you want to get to the questions? Yeah, I know what knife I would use. Half-face blades. Shameless plug. We love you, Beto.
Okay, so there's two primary questions. Here's the first one from Jeff Taylor. Eddie, how have you adapted to the lack of adrenaline rush while transitioning? And Andrea, how do you help Eddie with this For me, this was the hardest part of leaving active duty, and my attempts to replace the adrenaline led to some bad behaviors way back then. Thank God he had other plans for me.
So with the adrenaline rush, I mean, I think that more goes into the fight or flight state that you're probably accustomed to and that you're in. And when I got out, I had no idea that I was in a fight or flight state all the time until I went and got tested, got a bunch of labs done. And when they came back, the guy showed me a chart and he was like, this is your fight or flight. And then I forget what the other, like stay and play is the other thing. He's like, the stay and play was at a low minimum. And he's like, you are in fight or flight 90% of your day. And I was like baffled because I'm like, I don't feel like I am right now. Like, and he's like, well, you are. And
we could tell.
You want to
yeah,
fight?
and
we could tell.
Exactly. So it's like that automatic. But in my mind, I'm like, no, this is how I am, and I'm normal, and it's not. So what I had to do is, and I think the adrenaline rush or the fight or flight thing is another constant work in progress too, right? You have to be very self-aware of how you're feeling, and like when you start feeling that adrenaline rush or fight or flight kick in, you have to know like, okay, I shouldn't, like, this is an appropriate response right now. Just like a little child, like, hey, all right, but unfortunately with our jobs and just law enforcement and everything else, I mean, those guys are constantly in a fight or flight state, right? They're doing their job nonstop. So it is a byproduct of the job. So what I've done is I went and got all my labs done. I've gotten on supplements like that have sort of helped regulate my system.
Yeah. Working with a professional. Yeah. And I also did a lot of talk therapy with Dr. Chris. And I just, like, I don't think I ever
exercise.
And that's what I was going to get to next. Like, I don't think I ever sat there and looked like, oh, I need to go get, this adrenaline rush on because of my physical routine, my workouts that I do. And that's like I'll tell you this, like, I have been disciplined in my fitness the whole time I was in. And some I've done it more than others, I think, to where sometimes I got ridiculed for it. And it's like, dude, you're constantly doing this. But it's helped me out tremendously since I got out, where it will tamper that adrenaline rush that you need.
Well, it's your way of channeling it.
Yeah, and channeling it.
He has to have it for mental stability. So running, exercising, fitness. So I think the positive outlet thing is huge.
And that is, yeah, like you want
replacing negatives with positive.
Find a positive outlet where you can still, that adrenaline rush, all that is just you challenging yourself. You doing something that is outside of your norm to, like, okay, I need to, like, get this rush, right? And you can still do that when you're outside of the job. Pick challenging things to do. Set a goal. Like, hey, I'm going to go do a 150-mile run, right? I guarantee you're going to come out of that. If you set that goal and go accomplish that, you're going to come out of that feeling fulfilled, like not needing, like, I need something else, and then I would just set healthy goals like that for yourself. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy like a 150-mile run. I'm just using that as an example. Like, it could be as simple as, like, hey, man, I'm going to get up and do 20 minutes of breathing. Like, and I'll tell you, that's another huge thing that I work on is my breathing. Like, that will bring me back down faster than anything. If I start recognizing the fact that I'm like, oh, here it comes, like, and I'll say this too, like, that ability to try and come down does not get any easier. Like, it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress. Yeah. Like, we had like a little incident a couple weeks ago going to the airport where these kids were messing around on the road, and, like, I spiked immediately because I thought my family was in danger. I'm like, these kids are putting my family in danger. But then it goes to a point where I'm like, I'm ready to go. Like, and obviously, thank God nothing happened. But then trying to come down from that took me hours to come down from that, where that's progress. Where before I'd be like that, I just wouldn't
Days.
stop being like that. I'm like, now I'm in this,
It's a lot of hard
I'm ready
work.
to go. And so, yeah, I would definitely focus on healthy aspects like working out, breathing. I mean, meditation, and as corny as this sound, like yoga, stretching, anything like that, where you can detach from your outside environment and really focus on yourself, you'll be able to come down from that. There's also, look into some supplements. I mean, and I'm not talking about prescriptions. I'm talking about what's like magnesium.
Well, that's, again, work with a professional.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, find someone who is pursuing, therapeutic modalities that will support your healing, will support your mental and emotional. Some of this is not your fault. Some of it is in your psychology. You do have to find positive outlets, replace them with negatives, and then you have to have someone that you need to make it a point. You got to work on the emotional, the baggage, the stuff. So it's not a one size fits all. I think as a spouse, it's constantly was at that point, identifying like something is not right there, and it's not going to be this one thing. So, we pursued, again, he did a lot of different work and modalities and therapies, and anything from hyperbaric chamber therapies to, he did Ibogaine, he did
Ganglion block.
the ganglion block. The Stella ganglion block is not promoted enough. I think that thing for him was huge. It just is, which again, we'll take time to talk about more of these, but look for organizations, look for nonprofits, look for things for you and your spouse to do together. Look for, we did spiritual retreats. We've done them, separate. We've done, and different things together. I think you gotta always be focused on the unity of both of you working on things. So the spouse talking to someone, you talking to someone, I think that's part of it. So just, it's a journey, and just keep pursuing health and wholeness in a way that you're going to, address
Love it.
some of these things.
And
I've got to pee.
go ahead.
I don't know how you guys sit this long. We're going to have to cut.
Go for it.
Cut.
Yeah, just
I was like,
just leave it going. I'll cut it out.
Another hour. Yeah, we'll start that back up when she comes back in.
Well, he can leave it running. I'll just cut it out of
Okay.
post pro. What do you think so far?
I don't think I've ever sat still in a chair this long in my life.
I know.
I've been over here just doing stuff.
We're almost done anyway.
Yeah, we'll be done here in a second.
Oh, it's all good. Take your time.
It's really good.
Yeah, I think this will be good. Do this once a month,
100%.
and then it's also going to help us like have an episode like we don't have to worry about. You know what I mean?
100%. Like the Justin Wallers.
Huh?
That dinner tonight.
Oh, dude. Yeah, you got to. I can't wait to hear about that.
Did you see his Instagram?
No, I didn't look him up. You got to. When you said he was best friends with Andrew Tate, that's pretty much all I had. I was like,
Think
yeah,
it like
got it.
The thing is though, what's different with him, I believe, we'll see, is I think he has a heart for like helping blue collar workers, like help them like get successful, get out of a rut, like.
Yeah, I mean, well, if he's not, as long as he's not selling snake oil and being like, because there's all these people out there now. I see him on Instagram, same thing. Like,
Use my program.
we're gonna get you, blah blah.
That's what I was saying. I
Yeah,
was like, everybody who like takes it to that next level of like, dude, you just need to.
they're
massive
robbing you.
effort, massive results. And follow me.
give me a break.
They're all con artists.
Yeah, but you can get a Lamborghini. You know? Like,
Oh, dude,
Lambo?
Ryan would love a Lamborghini. I would
Yeah,
never
Ryan
buy
may
a car
know who
like
he
that.
is.
I break one in a day.
Oh, we
Not
can't.
the
We
worst
can't have nice
investment
things.
that you
Nothing
could-
nice. Like, yeah. Like that's why I'm a blue collar worker, dude. Like, I meant to destroy things.
Even if you got money, it's like those are the worst investments.
What's
But they get the chicks, you know what I mean?
Ryan's
Chicks,
the
the
only
money.
car fanatic in the family.
Yeah.
I feel like. Ryan loves cars.
Okay, so are we ready? Yeah, and I don't even know why I look at you. All right, so the next question comes from Dave Sands. I would want to know how starting a business was after leaving military. It's been a rough go for me after leaving LE.
Law enforcement.
Got it. Figuring out how to work for yourself, LLC setup, learning to make money with your passions. I want to learn how to make merch store for my podcast. So just overall, like leaving law enforcement and then entrepreneurial endeavors.
Well, I'll give my little tidbit right now because I am definitely not the expert on this. I will say, for me, I have the golden goose over here, Andrea. She's the only reason I was able to
say my name. The Better Business Babe.
The Better Business Babe. BBB.
That was the Instagram account for so long while I was fighting for him and people. The Better Business Babe.
But that is the only reason I was able to start any type of business and semi going to the entrepreneurial world. I still have a hard time calling myself an entrepreneur just because I don't have I'm not business minded. But I have married to, thank God, someone that is, and she gives me all the helpful tips, the advice. I mean, and that's one thing. And I'll bring this back to the marriage thing real quick is being able to recognize where your deficiencies are and where your partner has strengths. And that is where I am deficient. I don't know shit about business. And I really don't have a mind for money. I served that whole time. I was getting a paycheck. It's pretty much on welfare, doing the job. But, getting out and having to, you recognize the fact okay, I got to do something to provide and make money. And that is where I turn to her, and where I'm at today in business is due to her and her advice and everything that she's helped me with. And I know she has struggled trying to deal with me as well.
He's my toughest client. He's my most difficult client.
I'm like the white Kanye. I cannot be managed.
Yeah, he can't be managed. Yeah, you are the white Kanye.
Yeah.
So I would say the answer to this is he's on the right track. I think that we're positioned in an amazing time that you can focus on your passion. You can build something for yourself. You can, obviously monetization of stuff is great. Sounds like he has a podcast, which is super cool. So I have always had a firm belief, and so I'll just go back. The reason I started, so originally my entrepreneurial journey started because I was at home raising kids, and my priority was being a wife and a mother. And with Eddie being gone and constantly deployed, I wanted to be able to do things that were available that I could do from home or that I could do, on the side while raising my children. And so I originally started out, I think it was right after Ryan was born. I was like, I want to turn my passion for photography into a business. And so I just, similar to what he's doing, how do I do it? What do I do? All this. And went through that process. And so we were in San Diego, and I built that from just literally begging people to take their photos to more of like a high-end boutique photography. I was doing all types of stuff with that. When I did realize, I was like, I really have a passion for, again, sharing that knowledge with people. Like, hey, do this, don't do that. Like, don't go get a business card made until you get your logo or your URL, or, like stuff that, right? Like when you're an entrepreneur or a business person, you've probably made all the mistakes. And so that actually was the birth of the consulting firm. Then I was actually just so passionate about helping small businesses. I started the Better Business Babe well over a decade ago, and it was really focused on women in business because San Diego had just such a thriving, supportive women in business entrepreneurial community. So I really just had such a great time with that. I have continued on and love doing it. I really had to put my consulting to the side when I was fighting for Eddie. But I will say, President Donald Trump told me, he's like, you are the best salesperson and you believe in your product, and your product is Eddie. So that same premise is, you can have a passion of something and you can turn it into anything. Like, you're such a multi-passionate entrepreneur. I feel like you could answer this question really good too. It's like, focus on your passion. Get support from people that have done it before you or better than you. A lot of times you can save yourself a ton of effort and energy. And this is really hard, right? Because a small business owner, you don't have a lot of coin. Pay for consulting. Get a little bit of help. Just do a monthly basis. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, I think it's sad to say that a lot of businesses probably stumble, fall, and never reach their full potential because they don't have the level of support or guidance, or find a mentor. You mentor tons of people. I mean, you do it for free. You do have the goodness of your heart for the entrepreneurial crowd, you know, or spiritually. And it's like, go to someone that can help and support you, or work with other people and collaborate and say, hey, you've done a great job at this. What could I do to support you? Maybe you have a skill, or he could trade with someone like, hey, I'll have you on the podcast. Can you help me with the merch? You know, I get it. I'm not saying everyone has 10 grand a month or whatever, even, you know, a couple grand a month to expend on things like that. But I do think that you do yourself a disservice to not put, if you really have the belief and you have the idea, go and get help from someone that you know is like, man, maybe I should go to that workshop. Maybe I should go to this, or maybe I should take a virtual course that someone's offering that does it so well. Because there is ways that you can participate and you could get knowledge in a much quicker, faster, more expedited manner. So that would be my advice, is to do that. And then, you know, God willing, there's a lot of fakers out there. There's a lot of false people out there that are just trying to make money, and there's no real exchange of values. So just be very careful who you go to. Yeah, because there is people that will take advantage, you know.
Well, you want to make sure whatever dealings you're getting into with somebody, that relationship is going to be reciprocal, right? Yeah. You're both helping each other out in some form or fashion. And like we run into it through our course. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there looking to take advantage, you know, and that's just unfortunately the American way. You know, people are like, hey, I want to get paid, I want to make money, but if you are trying to start your business, I would say surround yourself with good people. Like, obviously, Dave, you came from the law enforcement community. I'm sure when you started off in law enforcement, you weren't just doing it on your own and being like, I'm going to become this officer on my own. You surrounded yourself with peers and mentors
training
that you wanted to emulate and be that type of person. Well, it's no different when you get out. Surround yourself with people that you're like, I want some of what he has, you know, and I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about like the way they handle business and the way they run things. Like, I want some of those traits. And the only way you're going to get those is by surrounding yourself with those type of people that are willing to invest in you and put in the work into you, like to help you get to where you need to be. But at the same time, you should be giving back to them as well. Yeah. Right. It should be a back and forth.
I think the other thing that he was really thrown by is, and I would just hammer this all the time, was like, you need to have stuff in writing. You need to have expectations. You need to have a clear understanding of what you're getting in exchange. So, you know, that I would say too, for people that are really starting off in an entrepreneurial pursuit, make sure that someone is telling you, what are they delivering for what you're giving them? What is it that you're, you know, if you're going to pay someone $200, okay, well, get the expectations clear, get the timeline, get the deliverables, things of that nature. He was so accustomed, like in a SEAL teams, it's just like, okay, it's a handshake. And I'm like, no, sir. No matter what we do, whether it was when we tackled taking on the book, you know, we brought in lawyers, we got contracts, we made sure, okay, what are we getting? What's the amount? We have known so many very smart, very intelligent, educated people that have gotten just railroaded. And I think that that's one thing that I brought into some of the circumstances that we navigated getting out, which some of them were thrust upon us, or even creating the nonprofit. Ask people, who did you go through to do that? We just gave it to another friend who, I was like, hey, here's our nonprofit lawyer. Here's who we used. That is a big, heavy lift. Like, you can't just create a nonprofit. There's a lot that goes into it. And it's you have to have legal documents. You have to have all these things. So I would say whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a business idea, whether it is just a simple contract or agreement, like, hey, I'm going to pay you X amount to do X, Y, and Z. make sure, because, and also if you work with people, those things delineate the expectations, and there's not any fight. There's no fight. There's no fight. And we would get into situations where it was like, well, I thought this and I thought this. I was like, well, did you have it in writing? Did you make that, was that a verbal agreement? Because that's very hard to keep verbal agreements. I think once you've worked with someone enough, that's fine. But at the onset, make sure to get stuff in writing. Make sure to feel that you are being represented in the right way and that you have everything outlined. Get those signatures, sign on the dotted line, and say, okay, this is what I'm providing. This is what you're providing. Handshake, great. That's a digital virtual handshake. Now I can just put it in DocuSign. Make it simple. You can get basic contracts. But that's also a good way to keep your business and your, maybe if you're working with a friend, your friendships in line.
It
there's
prevents
no
a lot
fight.
of resentments.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no fight.
Yeah.
So that's another thing I would say would be great advice. But you probably have good advice, Dave.
Yeah, there's tons.
I know.
There's so much. What I think of, sometimes the journey requires you to, I'm typically a little bit more hard-headed, so I have to make a lot of mistakes sometimes to know, hey, okay,
Yeah.
that's not the way. But then you get smarter as you go along, and you go, and it's so tough in the beginning. It was really, especially, my background was software, so starting a software as a service. What I built initially, there's only, I think, 670 of them in the world, and most of them, almost all of them, have been built by teams, and I built it initially myself. So it was
Wow.
I don't recommend that route, right? It was
Right.
something, but it was so aligned with my passion. It aligned
you
everything
go.
where, I quit my job and went all in on it and was like, oh, we'll figure it out.
That's super cool.
Then we were broke and we figured it out, you
Yeah.
know, but I do think when people say, hey, I have this route, what I do now is I will take a lot of time up front to explore it, to think through it.
100%.
I will know my margins and stuff like that before I spend a dime on something like with merch or something. I would know my price point with it. I would know, okay, at quantity levels, I would have a spreadsheet on it, and I would do that work up front. It's the sucky work of it, but before I even bought a shirt or made, I can go, okay, is this really what I want? And then if I still think it is, then I begin to test.
Right.
And I would do small amounts. When you're bootstrapping something, especially if you're coming from a law enforcement background, you don't have tons of expendable cash to just
Right.
drop in things. And I would not get an investor, if possible, ever,
Right.
possibly.
Right.
You know?
Own it yourself. The other thing
But-
that's a good point is collaborate, because you sound like you're a spreadsheet guy. I can tell you that's not us.
Sure.
So collaborating with someone, or get a bookkeeper or
Yeah.
get that person. But yeah, that's a great point too. Find someone
Yeah.
that knows how to do it. If you don't have that skill set, start piecemealing. Okay, maybe I should have a profit and loss or a spreadsheet or whatever. If you can't do it, pay someone.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And at the first part, it's tough because you're like, okay, pay someone out of my, couple
Meager
$100
earnings.
bucks,
Yeah.
it's tough. And then what you're paying for usually at that level, you're going to get less usually. And you don't necessarily know at first, sometimes not. But to get it to the next level, you just focus on posts of how do I get this to the next level
Right.
where I'm clearing a couple grand a month, where I'm clearing $1,000 a month. And what I do know though is to get from 0 to 5,000 was almost impossible for me.
Right.
I had to throw some Hail Marys. I had to just do whatever it took to get myself out there to make it happen. But to get to 5,000 a month to 20,000 a month was easier. And to get from 20 to 100 and so on, it's easy. It gets
That's
easier
the
in
secret
a
of
sense.
entrepreneurship. It is the hardest in the beginning. So that's where I think the collaboration
100%.
comes in.
And it takes longer
It does.
than you
It does.
think.
Yeah, well, I think that's the only decent piece of advice I can give in on this is stay consistent,
Yeah.
maintain a strong work ethic, and remain flexible,
Yeah.
right? And those three things are hard to do together sometimes, right? Because especially for for law enforcement or just men in general, I think like we're like, yeah, I'm working my ass off and I'm staying consistent, and then something doesn't go my way, then it's like, whoa, but you have to like, again, maybe emotionally detach from that situation and flex to another one to maintain that consistency. But that also comes with surrounding yourself with good people and getting good advice from individuals on what to do.
You can get a ton of free advice online.
I Google everything.
I mean, come on. Yeah, you don't need to spend a dime. But, when you really want someone to take the personal interest and invest in your business, like, yeah, it's probably good to hire someone, just do, a little agreement for consulting and just say, hey, should I do this? Should I do that? And I mean, that can save you so much time, so much energy, and get you to that finish line faster.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I would recommend the Better Business Babe at
As I would too.
Or I don't know.
Honey, I don't have a Gmail.
Or at Andrea at the Better Business.
Hello at betterbusinessbabe.com. That's the other thing. Get the email branded, buddy.
Yeah.
For all your marketing needs.
You're all in the beginning. You're always selling. Like you have to be.
Well,
But
yeah.
One thing I do think is you can almost be too. The number one quality in entrepreneurship, and both of you have it, whether you want to be an entrepreneur or not, it's grit.
Yep. Tenacity, grit.
You have to be able to take the lumps and get back up and continue on. And you can almost make anything successful. Now, the level of it, I don't know, depends on a lot of things.
I think it's also defining what success is to you.
Yeah, to be able to be profitable, to get it to a place that you want it. If you have grit and you don't stop and you keep going, and you learn along the way, you'll always be learning. But you can, on the other side, you can almost be too smart sometimes for your own good.
Yeah. Oh.
And you overanalyze, you get paralysis analysis, and that I see cause guys to just freeze up more than anything else. It's like they're trying to determine everything, and it's like, no, you have to be in action.
Right.
You got to stay there.
Well, and I think for us too, the collaboration, that's what my business was built on, was I was like, we are all better together. So I was never in competition with anybody. When I was in photography and I was like, that's not my skill set. I don't do babies. I don't do weddings. Go to this person. And just developing that community of being that person that was like, hey, I'm referring this to you. I'm giving this business to you. It creates, rather than having that like, we're in competition together, like I'm against you. I'm like, that's actually the worst mindset to have in business. And yes, you will run across some people that are not reputable, of course, but it's even like now that I'm in real estate, it's like there's a real estate agent on every block. It's like, but I'm not in competition with that person. I'm in competition with myself. And that's where I feel like his level of entrepreneurial skills that he does bring to the table, a lot of it are very much in alignment with that mentality of like, he's just trying to be the best version of himself. He has been thrust in situations that, we had to really work to establish and understand how to bring the best value out of those situations. So, whether it was creating the nonprofit or writing the book or, developing like his overall brand, it is who he is. This isn't a persona. This isn't like and it's like, that's what people don't get. I think when you're really truly in alignment with yourself and your goals and your passions and your priorities, this isn't a fake thing. It's true. It's real. And that's what I think people are so attracted to him about, like his passions, whether that's the training or whether that's, the stuff that he loves, like with his merch line. We have been able to build it around what he's truly passionate about. Of course, we've made missteps. We've worked with different individuals and we worked with great companies, and we've just evolved and changed, and that is part of the process, right? That's part of the entrepreneurial journey is, like you said, you got to be willing to pivot. Yeah.
And then, maintaining authenticity and transparency the whole time. Don't, and this is where it's a great advice. Don't compare yourself to others. Don't try to do what others are doing just because they are successful, because what I see, especially in the law enforcement and veteran community, where guys are successful, but they've sort of made caricatures of themselves, and they get stuck in that, and then they can no longer pivot or do something else because that's what people expect of them every time. And so I would just say, remain authentic, be yourself. Don't worry about what others are thinking. The negative comments and all that will always be there no matter what you do. But as long as you can wake up every day, look yourself in the mirror and be like, I am being myself, I am proud of what I am doing, then you're on the right path.
Yeah.
And then I also like the collaboration piece too. It's, the mantra I've always had, especially when I was locked up, is like everybody eats, right? Find yourself a group that you can collaborate with, that you trust, that you guys are all in it for the right reasons and you are helping each other out, and stay within that group. You guys will build up together.
Spoken like a true entrepreneur.
Look
what
at
I've
you,
made.
man.
This is
Look at your product.
I'll get there.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I love that. That's really good business people. Like, and there's actually a lot of them out there, a lot more than I thought growing up. I used to have poor man's mindset, and my mom would be like, those people, they're horrible. And it's like, no, some of the best people I know
100%.
are super successful, and they give back in so many ways. And when guys get success, just like you do with others, I'm sure, it's like, man, you love to help other people. You want to see other people succeed, like genuinely.
Yeah.
It's not, oh, I'm saying that because it's a nice thing, but really I want to take.
Yep.
It's like, no, your success doesn't mean that I don't get success.
Right.
It's not taken away from mine. In fact, together, we'll both be more successful. And you build those relationships with business people like that,
Yep.
that you can deeply
You'll
trust.
go so far.
They won't do any situation that's not a win-win.
Right.
And they're thinking about the other person in the corner, and they're going, okay, this makes sense for me, but does it make sense for them?
Right.
If it doesn't, then it's no deal. It has to be a win for both.
Yeah.
Those are some of the best people. They're some of my best friends and mentors.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. I think we'll wrap it up for this segment. But like we said in the beginning, this is going to be a monthly series. Andrea and I and Dave will come on here once a month. If please, when you hear this, put in the comments what you like, didn't like. It doesn't, we'll take everything, and then also what you would like to hear covered, topics that you would like to hear covered about the transition process, and we will do our best to do so. So I appreciate everybody listening. God bless.
Yeah, no product plug. Like, this is just genuinely to help people.
Yes.
I love it.
No.
I love it.
Only thing I was thinking of, what's my tagline on the way out? Because don't you guys say out?
Out. Yeah.
Out.
What's yours?
Catch me on the flippity flip. Michael Scott.
Kissing the flippity flop.
Isn't that Michael? Michael?
From The Office?
Is that from The Office or is that from I Love You?
That was from Boondock Saints.
Nuh-uh.
Catch you on the flip side. Is what
Yeah,
it says.
that's what he says in Boondock Saints.
Catch
But
you
there
on-
is.
Ooh, that's a cool
that's
one
gangster.
too.
Yeah.
That's a cool one too.
Let's
All
do
right.
that. Catch you on the flip side.
Catch you on the flip side.
Okay, catch you on the flip side.
Out.
Awesome.